I don't think the run to gold has started outside of the central banks. It's starting to go into the public somewhat. But the real run to gold hasn't really started at the central banks. So I sort of contradicted myself. They're just starting to buy more than they have over the last 50 years, according to the World Gold Council. There's others that say that's a misnomer. It really wasn't that much. Regardless, the movement of gold is accelerating, but it's just starting to accelerate. As things get worse over the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see the banks go more and more and more into gold. And whether, they report it or not, remains to be determined. It probably will. But if you look at the People's Bank of China, I mean, they have 2.2 thousand tons of gold, 2,200 tons. But really, if you look at the aggregate of China, it's probably 30,000.
Hey guys, welcome back to Capital Cosm. Today we're joined by David Morgan again. David, thanks for making it back on Capital Cosm, my friend.
Danny, it's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. As always, guys, I'd like to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, check out our Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com. We'll have a portion of this interview exclusive to Substack, so just be on the lookout for that if you want the full version. David, let's just start right off. What is your overview of the economy and the markets right now? What do you see out there in terms of like a 30,000-foot view?
Well, Danny, my view really hasn't changed much since, probably our last interview. I mean, the truth is the overall global economy is contracting. So we're making less stuff, we're producing less food, even though the money supply in most countries is increasing, the actual physical economy is deteriorating. Not in every sector, not in every business, but on aggregate, on the whole, it's contracting. So that's number one. Number two is, I think the market is starting to realize that there's a marked difference between the physical economic well-being of a nation state, the global economy, and the financial markets. Financial markets continue to get these new highs and, all this rhetoric about, things are good, it's great, never been better, Bidenomics is working and all this nonsense. And the market's starting to look at that a little differently and starting to reflect that the financial markets are well overvalued on any metric you want to look at. And you see such obvious moves from notables such as Warren Buffett and many of the billionaire class that are exiting the stock market or at least lightening their load substantially. And the banking stocks, of course, are a precursor to, what's going on in the system as it exists, because when you can print wealth and get away with it for a very long time, and then you come to that point where you have to pay the piper, or really that money isn't very valuable and it has to be repriced, that's when you start to see things happen. So the stock market needs to be repriced, and I believe that's going to start here. Maybe it's already started, but it will take some time, but it will get there.
Is there a chance that we actually see a continuation of the melt up, though? I mean, we've seen, calls for a stock market crash for a while now, and the market continues to surprise. Number one, why do you think that is? And number two, what is, like, if you had to put a probability on it, what are the probabilities that we actually see a surprise and it keeps shooting up?
Well, let me thank you for that question, because I changed my point of view about 2 years ago. It suddenly dawned on me that the United States is not that exceptional and it's not a special case. So I'd always thought there would be a reprice of the stock market to the downside. But if you look at history, it's quite obvious when you go to a hyperinflationary environment, stock market could take off going, making new highs, and more new highs. But yet, and that's a safe place to be versus the currency system. But it usually, in all cases I've studied, which is most, it does not compete with the actual depreciation of the currency. So let me say it a little better. Stock market could take off and keep going, even though the physical economy is deteriorating, because the inflation is so great that people are pouring their money in the stock market to save it from the ravages of inflation. And it helps. But usually nothing actually mitigates the inflationary depreciation of the currency better than the precious metals. So like in the Weimar Republic, for example, stock market went sky high and it protected you somewhat, but not like gold and silver did. So we could get in that situation. I quit ruling that out a couple of years ago, Danny. So what's the probability? That's a tough one. I wouldn't say it's 50%, but it could be at this point in time as high as 10%. And then there'll be my detractors, and not my detractors, but the detractors of people that listen to shows like yours and say, "Oh, those guys don't know what to talk about. I never made so much money," and then they realize the value of that money and that it's really not doing anything. And we're probably going to be approaching that place within 2 to 3 years. I don't think we're going to get through this decade without some kind of inflationary, hyperinflationary, or inflationary event that really resets the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, and then also it's the stock market could trace the the devaluation of the currency, but the caveat to that is eventually you're going to have to pay capital gains tax. So even if you have a one-to-one retracement or one-to-one tracement of your currency, in that scenario, you're still paying 30% long-term capital gains, whatever it is for the short term, and so you actually come out beneath, you actually come out below than what you would have had you just held currency, right?
Well, that depends. I mean, that's a variable, but you're right. I mean, the general idea is the only thing that's ever survived a hyperinflationary environment have been gold and silver. Stock market, again, mitigates it somewhat, but then, what's the tax situation? And then, of course, what's the government look like? I mean, the government's crumbling like in the Weimar Republic. And that's why, World War II came about with Hitler coming out and all that. We don't have time to go into it. But the idea is that, yeah, maybe you owe it, but people just say the hell with it. I got screwed by the currency system. It's not, whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I won't go any further, but it could continue to go up. That's the point. And I agree it could.
Let's go ahead and pivot over to gold and silver really quick. Let me get your take on the current gold and silver market. Gold's at 25 with a 2,500 handle now for quite a while. Silver is struggling a little behind at the $28 handle. What do you make of the current precious metals market? Where are we? Are we a little too overstretched, or is this show just getting started?
Well, that's both. I mean, on a technical basis, on a nominal number, gold's overbought and probably correct somewhat. Silver probably sympathize with it, but on a amount of currency printed basis, I mean, gold's about as cheap as it's ever been. So we really have a long ways to go. I mean, if you want to go back on a sound money standard, you'd have to push gold up to about 20,000 the ounce, which is eightfold what it is from now. And we had a pretty good run from 2000 to 2011. Gold went from like 252 to about 2000. We had about an eightfold increase, sevenfold, something like that. So could it do it again? I'd say absolutely. So you could go, from 2,500 to, into the 1,000, 10,000, 20,000. Will it take place? I don't know. And again, the powers that be want to keep the power. They want to keep the money power. And all they have to do to make that happen is convince people to have faith in their system, the digital system. And then, of course, the power of law, the power of the police state. You can't have currency anymore, or you're only allowed to spend $100 or less in currency. Anything more than that's reported, or who knows what they'll come up with. But they'll try everything that doesn't work. I mean, wage and price controls are probably the next step, probably with either administration. I hold a political class in contempt most of the time. So, and that, of course, makes people believe that the government has the power to stop increasing wages and stop prices increasing. But all it does is cause further disruptions in the economy, because the best economy is a free economy. And the more constraints you put on it, the worse it gets.
Yeah, I mean, with all these constraints, what are opportunities going to look like once these price controls come into play? Most likely, not 100% slam dunk, but it seems like they're coming. And then you have like things like unrealized gains on capital gains taxes. Now, whether that comes down the pike is still to be determined. But let's say we go down this very constraining environment to investing. What do you invest in at that point? If they're going to tax your capital gains, if they're going to control prices, like is gold and silver pretty much the last stand here, or will commodity stocks and things of that nature still hold a some favorability?
Well, they'll revalue. They'll always be around, but there'll be a huge change where you have, real things like commodities will do better than, financial assets, and even real estate will be repriced. So you'll have, you asked earlier, I think, what would it look like? What it'll look like is more and more of a free market. Of course, the government will call it a black market, or extremists or whatever, but whatever label they put on it, it's called a black market, which is really a free market. Is if you have a price control on chocolate bars, for example, your grocer's only allowed to, price them at a certain price. So if he's not going to be able to make a profit on them, he's not going to stock them. But the market still demands them. So people that have it will take it and they'll go underground and, hey, you want chocolate? Line you up. I got a friend that has it. What does he want? Oh, he wants this. Yeah, I want to pay that. I want that. I'll pay my, 2 silver dimes, my 2 silver dimes for, half a pound of chocolate or whatever the going rate is. So that's what happens. That's, and I mean, that's easily provable in, again, Argentina or Venezuela or Turkey or, all these countries that have gone through this. Of course, they will try to mitigate. The federal government, even the state government, the police state will come in and, you can't do it. And, they want chocolate too. So they'll kind of look the other way. So there really is always a free market. As far as on the mainstream markets, those will be repriced. You'll see, stocks become less popular, probably. We've already talked about the case for them going higher, and that's for protection, but it's not for, earnings or being owner of a company. It's more for mitigating an inflationary problem. So you'll see all those things will come back. The one thing that may not would be the bond market. I mean, if government fails, then they cannot pay their bonds. And this has happened over and over and over again, by the way. And so those pieces of paper that support the debt system, which it is totally a debt system, become invalid. And now the currency fails because all a bond is a long-term piece of currency. Really, a 30-year bond means you're going to get $1,000 30 years out if you buy it today, and it's going to be $1,000. You think $1,000 30 years from now is going to have the same value $1,000 does in 2024. I've got some good services to sell you. So that's where we're heading. That's where it's going to go. Exactly how does it unravel differently in different places? I mean, if you're Amish, it's probably going to be a bit of a yawn. But if you're in a penthouse in New York City, it's going to be a big change in lifestyle.
Well, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But a big point of contention is how it plays out, right? You've got people in the inflationary camp, people in the deflationary camp. There's some people who say that we're going to have deflation and then inflation right thereafter. How do you see this playing out? Are you how do you see the sequence of events playing out in your view?
Well, a couple things. One is that there's an adage in the financial markets, especially on the tack I've taken in looking at monetary history. All inflation's end in deflation. That's one. The other one is there's never been a time where you've had a true debt liquidating or a true deflation in a fiat system. If you have a gold standard like we had in the 30s, you can get a debt liquidating depression where currency actually became more and more valuable, but it was backed by gold. Not for the populace, it was confiscated and repriced, but for the international gold standard, it was repriced, and it actually helped. So prices actually came down during the 30s, but again, we were on a international gold standard. So, but when you're on a pure fiat regime, every time 100% it's gone into a hyperinflationary depression. Remember, I used the word depression. So you get a currency And you get the same things almost as you get in a debt liquidating depression or a deflationary depression. High unemployment, high uncertainty, huge jobless rate with a depressed feeling among the populace that things are bad and they're not going to get any better. Much more barter, lower living standards. What used to be taken for granted as almost a staple becomes scarce or scarcer, and that then the only difference is in the one hyperinflation, the currency fails, and a debt liquidating depression or deflation, the currency stays sound. And so the only currencies that stay sound are the ones that were backed by something, and this one isn't. Now the BRICS may be able to mitigate some of this with their own, plethora of countries that have joined using their own currencies. And, there's talk of what they're going to do in this next meeting, where maybe they're going to back their currency 40% with gold. That's out on the web right now. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I don't know if they know. But there could be the possibility, if there was a gold-backed currency, that, of course, the market would probably flood to it at some point in time. But then again, they don't have the debt market to supply credit to the system to rebuild. So is it a solution? I don't think it's a solution. I think it mitigates the problem for them or anyone that joins them, but I don't think it'll buffet the problem, but not cure the problem.
Yeah, you did mention the BRICS in passing. I want to get your thoughts on how you see the BRICS nations, moving forward. Throughout, ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've had this unipolar world. The New World Order came into play. We have been living in this New World Order essentially since the end of the Soviet Union, which is what George H.W. Bush was alluding to. But now it looks like you've got another competitor. You've got another challenger on the scene, which is the multipolar world through BRICS. So my question to you is, we see all these videos from like the World Economic Forum about you'll own nothing and be happy, and they're making it out to seem like these are internationals, these are people who espouse a world government. But in your view, are we looking more towards a world government future or a multipolar future where we've got two world orders competing against each other? One being the BRICS, the other, of course, being the West, Europe, America, New Zealand, Australia, etc.
Yeah, you said it well. I think the globalist system has peaked. I think that it's going the other way, although many people would argue differently. First, I don't really know, but looking at how it's unraveling, there's a survival instinct. If you are in a situation where a house is burning or your workplace is burning, I mean, you might be big-hearted enough to help, the secretary get out or someone who's crippled get out or whatever, but the instinct is to survive yourself. And on that basis, there's also like a financial survival instinct, according to me. And that means I'm going to protect my nation state over your nation state. You guys have been ripping us off. Take the resource wars. There's a book downstairs in the other library called Resource Wars by Adrian Day. And so people look around and what is the real wealth? Well, it's labor. So it's a workforce and it's raw materials. So if you're Mexico and you're like one of the largest producers in silver and you're getting underpaid for it, maybe you just quit exporting it, or maybe you'll trade it at a higher rate or whatever. So this is what happens. So I think that's the opposite of globalism. That's looking after your own people and your own nation state. And that's the trend that's starting, and that's starting to gather more and more momentum. So the BRICS, even though they're a body of different countries, they're different countries with different currencies that are willing to trade amongst themselves. And the BRICS aren't saying change your country, become part of our new world order. We just want to trade with you for your goods and services. We'll accept your currency, and maybe they'll come up with a currency amongst themselves, and that'd be okay. That's like the euro, although it works better really if you have your own individual currency. It really does, because there's different customs, different factors, different ideas about how long you should work and all that. But regardless of all of that, you want diversity. You don't want, one point of failure. And that's basically where we're at with the US dollar. We're at one point of failure. If the dollar goes, everything goes.
Yeah, you did mention this 40% gold-backed currency that the BRICS alluded to. Is there historical precedence to like what percentage of a currency being backed by gold tends to work? Because I mean, when we broke away from the gold standard, it was not a 100% gold standard. I can't remember what percentage it actually was. But historically speaking, what's kind of like the allocation strategy to a currency to gold?
Yeah, 40 is the number that's been used. The true gold coin standard is 100%. So you don't
Okay.
even have, you can have a currency or a piece of paper that's, backed by gold, but a gold coin standard where you just, really trading in coins only is 100%. So no, the idea has usually been around 40%. And then, of course, the problem with the gold standard isn't gold. I mean, gold's an inert element on the periodic chart that history says people vote as being the most superior money. That's what it is. The problem with the gold standard is the human element. If you're supposed to have so much gold in your vault and then you print receipts against it that are greater than the amount of gold in the vault, now you're being dishonest, you're cheating, you're lying, you're actually stealing. And that's what's always happened. That's the problem with the gold standard, is how do you mitigate that you really do have that 40%. And now it's 30%. And that's what happened in 71. Basically, the UK and France came to the US and said, we think you're lying. We think you're cheating. We think you're stealing purchasing power. You say we could convert dollars for gold at $35 an ounce. Here's the dollars. Give me the gold. And as the draining of the gold supply started to happen, it potentially draining the whole thing. Of course, that never did happen, but Nixon temporarily closed the gold window. So that's the problem. I mean, and in a blockchain environment where it's, sacrosanct and it's there and all that, even that still has a human element involved. I think it'd be probably superior to what's done now, or done in the past, I should say. But it's not really guaranteed. I mean, the only real guarantee is, a gold and silver coin standard, where that's all transactions. But then you get into the problem of, well, how do you give credit? And there's a lot of issues surrounding that. It's not an easy idea to have a sound money system that works, everywhere, always, for everyone. But certainly the honesty factor is number one. Paper money system will work just fine if there's a one-to-one correspondence between the goods, services, and the amount of currency issued. But if you issue more currency than exists in reality, then you're cheating somebody. And the people that get that new money first are able to spend it with full knowledge that they're cheating the system. So let's buy up, these houses before the price goes up. And then people are very ignorant about inflation on the most part. They see the price of their house go up, so they feel richer. No, you're not richer. It's the same house you bought 20 years ago. Yeah, it's doubled in price, but the value's the same. If you sell it and you want to be in the same neighborhood, you just have to pay double what you did 20 years ago. And even if you move to an area that's less expensive, you might have made out somewhat, but really, if you look at it on aggregate, on the whole, you really haven't done that well, because the prices of your education, your insurance, and everything else have gone up so much. So, of course, a lot of people do take that windfall, you might call it a windfall, and mitigate that by going to a foreign country. So if you doubled your house price and take that profit and then go to Uruguay or Paraguay or Mexico or whatever, now you probably made out in real terms. But if you do it in the US, there's exceptions. You can move from, a very high price place like, Los Angeles, California to Alabama and have a real gain. But and I'm not putting down either one of those. I'm just trying to give the example that people don't understand that the price is going up doesn't necessarily mean you're getting rich.
Yeah, and so we've been seeing this increase in gold price for the entirety of this year, for the most part, and it appears to be at the heels of central bank buying more specifically, Eastern central bank buying. You look at places like Russia, they have a record supply of gold reserves at this very moment in time. China is buying gold in vast quantities. My question to you is, do we see that same pattern in the Western sphere? And if not, why not? Why is the West not stockpiling in gold in much the same way that the East is? Is there something that the East knows that the West doesn't, or vice versa?
Well, all the top bankers know that's a given. The East does it more because they are probably more susceptible to a dollar demise than the U.S. is until it happens. So there's more flows to the East than there has been in the West. Although you look at what's happened in central banks at large, I mean they're all buying gold at a high rate. So they know that it's the money of last resort. They really, in my opinion, studied opinion, don't really want to use it. They're using it like, if you run out of everything else, then we can start the new system with, a gold backing. Is it 100%? Is it 40%? Is it digital? Can you be able to exchange your new digital unit for actual gold? No, you can't do that, but trust us, it's 40% backed by gold. Yeah, last time you did that, after Bretton Woods, it only lasted from, after the war in 44 till 1971 because you guys cheated. You're going to do that again. All that stuff comes into play. But I don't think the run to gold has started outside of the central banks. It's starting to go into the public somewhat. But the real run to gold hasn't really started the central banks. So I sort of contradicted myself. They're just starting to buy more than they have over the last 50 years, according to the World Gold Council. There's others that say that's a misnomer. It really wasn't that much. Regardless, the movement of gold is accelerating, but it's just starting to accelerate. As things get worse over the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see the banks go more and more and more into gold. And whether, they report it or not remains to be determined. It probably will. But if you look at the People's Bank of China, I mean, they have 2.2 thousand tons of gold, 2,200 tons. But really, if you look at the aggregate of China, it's probably 30,000 tons. Because when the U.S. asks how much gold do you have, they ask the People's Bank of China what they hold. They give them the number, 2,200. But they don't say, well, how much gold is internal to the Chinese population? It's probably 15 times that.
Yeah. Well, aside from gold, any other opportunities out there that you see that people can take advantage of given the current circumstances? Aside from gold,
silver's far superior to gold at this point in time. I mean, the gold silver ratio is at 78 to 1. It takes 78 silver ounces to make an ounce of gold or buy an ounce of gold. And the amount of silver that's an investment form is about equal to the amount of gold, probably a little bit less. And so, especially in a barter type situation, or even not a barter, I mean, you can use silver, as money right now. So I think it's very undervalued, even if compared to gold, and it's affordable. It's affordable for almost anyone. So on a legacy investment going out 10 years or more, I think you could hardly miss with silver, buying it basically at the cost of production. If you can buy any commodity at the cost of production, or particularly under the cost of production, and have some patience, you're going to make out. I mean, you can't buy, name a commodity: oil, lumber, cotton, cocoa, sugar. If you're buying it at what the production cost is or less, all you have to do is be able to store it, keep it in good shape, and then wait, and the price will go higher. And that's basically the price of silver really is pretty close to production costs. And so you could go into the silver mining business just by buying silver and putting it in a safe, and then wait for the inevitable for the price to reflect the scarcity of the commodity.
Are you in the market for gold and silver? Then if so, please consider Miles Franklin. They are my gold and silver dealer of choice. So not only do they have super competitive prices that you're going to have a really hard time finding elsewhere, but then they also have top-notch customer support. I know Andy Schechtman, the owner of Miles Franklin. top-notch guy. I wouldn't be recommending them to you if I didn't have faith in their product. But what you really want to do, however, you want to email them at info@milesfranklin.com, and you want to say that Capital Cosm sent me in the description line, because when you do that, you can get access to their special pricing sheet. You want to get that special pricing sheet because you're going to get special prices that you won't find on the website itself. So email them at info@milesfranklin.com. Tell them that Capital Cosm sent you, and you won't be heckled with spam emails, etc. There's no commitment necessary. I promise you that. And with that said, I will let you get back to the video. Yeah, you mentioned oil there. You know, I have all these guests on, and I see it on YouTube as well. There's a lot of doom and gloom about like World War III, tensions rising geopolitically. But then you take a look at the price of oil, and it's just like, it's in essentially almost a free fall. We hit a 60 handle last week. I don't know what it's at currently, but with all these tensions worldwide, is the fact that oil is going down a kind of like a counter signal to all that stuff, or is it simply like a is the global economy in such piss poor shape that even with all of this geopolitical risk, it's still going down?
I think it's the latter. I think, there's enough. First of all, if you look after the illness happened, I mean, what happened in transportation, what happened in, all transportation. You look at the Baltic Dry Index, you look at, airline traffic, you look at roadway traffic, you look at, 18-wheelers. And so really a lot of oil usage was curtailed a great deal. And we're seeing, even now where the contraction of the economy. I mean, if you're not making as much stuff as you used to, as much stuff doesn't come out of the factory and you need to go across the road to, the shopping centers. I mean, look at how much retail has been mitigated or absolutely bankrupt and no longer in existence in the United States. I went through that on one of my weekly podcasts some time ago, but I can't remember them all. But something like 35 failures of the bed, breakfasts, and beyond, and all these retail markets. So there's energy is what makes the world go round. It isn't money. So as the economy contracts, that means the amount of energy needed contracts. So that's really the big picture. Now, war, of course, is very energy intensive, as we all know, but how much of this proxy war is I don't even know how to state it correctly, is at a static point, meaning that it's really not increasing with energy demand. It's still going on. It's escalated from the beginning till now, but now it's not really increasing or decreasing. It's kind of leveled off. And I think that's where we're at. So you have a contracting economy with a leveling off of the war efforts, be them in many jurisdictions, and that's going to cause the price of oil to come down.
Well, Dave, is there any is there anything that you see? Is there a view that you have that no one else is talking about that you want to put out there?
Well, perhaps, and that's in my documentary, Silver Sunrise. It's at silversunrise.tv. I think it's about the control money has over people. I mean, if you Google or do a search engine on what's the number one stressor for people on the planet, like 85% stress about their money. Money transcends nationality, religious origin, whatever. Everyone's concerned about their money, whether it's a rupee in India or a peso in Mexico. People are worried if they have enough. And if they do have enough, do they have enough for retirement with inflation? And if they're really rich, they're worried about who's going to try to take it from them or steal it from them or scam them. So everyone's concerned about money. So the documentary looks at it from a more spiritual perspective. It's like, why does it have this much control? And should we let it have this much control? And if we really live in an infinite universe and there's abundance everywhere, then why are we in the scarcity mentality? And why do we let these bankers give us a scarcity mentality? Why are we buying into it? Why can't? So it explores a lot of those ideas that really hasn't been done in the monetary sphere very often. That's the goal of my movie. There'll be a lot of hardcore stuff that I've talked about how the economy really works and how the banking elite basically control, the political class and the corporate class. But there's an element about, what about me? What about my well-being? What does it take? How much do I really need? And how much is there really out there? And what about the energy equation? What if we really have the ability to tap into energy that's basically cost-free? How would that change the world? What would it look like? What would it look like if India had all the energy it needed for free? What would they produce then? So it's these kind of questions I want people to think about, because I think there's a lot of things in the current system that are done by a bunch of parasitic control freaks that want to paint a picture of reality that really isn't true, and that we need to work together to bring these things to the fore. And some of these are rock solid. I mean, but they're just suppressed. So it's looking at a future, questioning everything and questioning the power of money. And do we even need money? I mean, I'm not saying we're going into the Star Trek Star Trek system, but that's something that not too many people have looked at. And as I've progressed on my path about, trying to teach about money and the control of it and how to be free, truly free, and it's brought me basically to this place where I didn't really want to write a book about it. I wanted to make a movie about it. So I think we would end with that, Danny. Certainly, you can tell I'm passionate about it because, it's unfortunate that that money is power, and these power elite have the ability to control us through it, and then especially when it's a fraud. They're printing something of no value and making us give our labor for very valuable, our labor for something of, yes, it has value in the marketplace. I mean, I could still buy a Starbucks for $6, but you know what I'm saying. In reality, it has very little.
Yeah. Well, we've got this election coming up. You mentioned the powers that be. Does it really matter who gets into office come January of next year, or is the cake pretty much baked?
Pretty much baked. I mean, I've said often that it's two wings on the same bird flying the same direction, usually at a different speed. I mean, if you get the Blues in there, then your team might slow things down somewhat. You get the Reds in there, but they overspend. They both are in a system, and the system really isn't going to change that much. The only way the system's going to change in a radical way is when the system basically collapses. And then, of course, you're not really wanting the most likely result. I mean, most of the time in a currency collapse, you get a dictatorship. And of course, that's not what any free thinking, free market oriented, freedom loving person wants. But people want security and they want safety and they want to be able to eat. And so, the strong man or strong woman or the strong AI comes into power and says, I'll fix your problem. Vote for me or whatever, or we're under martial law. Sorry, we had to do it. It's for your own good. Here's what we're going to do. And of course, those cases are usually very favorable to a very, very few and crush everyone else. So it's very sad thinking about it, but it doesn't have to be that way. And again, that's why, I point out in this documentary that, there's no way out of the system per se. I mean, not everybody can go to an agrarian lifestyle and have, 3 acres and grow their own food and have a couple, 10 chickens and a couple goats. But there are the whole idea of how it's issued, who issues it, is it fair? All those questions I've asked over the years come out in this movie. And I don't have a lot of solutions. I have some, but the main one goes back to energy. Are our sources of energy being suppressed from what they could be? And if they are, then how do we work around that and start moving into the next leg up in humanity, where really we're good to each other, which generally speaking, I'm a believer that there's more good than bad in humans, but it's not the human to human interface that's the problem. It's the power elite that control these nation states that get us into trouble. There's very few people that vote, yeah, let's go to war. It's the leader, quote unquote, leader of that country that has a beef with the leader of another country. And George Orwell did a great job of that in 1984 with these perpetual wars, basically to keep the populace subdued and the economy going.
Yeah, but Aren't our leaders of the people themselves? Aren't they a byproduct of the people? So, if, I mean, they're being these hierarchical positions are just being filled out by the most sociopathic people amongst us. So,
Well, yeah, you could argue that. I mean, of the people, for the people, and by the people. I mean, that's certainly the idea. But if you look at a real free market election, there's only a certain class. I mean, look at Ron Paul. I mean, Ron Paul
mhm.
probably woke up more people than anyone else politically in a very, very long time. And yet he's only allowed to get on stage in the mainstream media for a very short time. And then they cut him off. So, but in a true free market election where we did get to go of the people, for the people, by the people, he would have been able to stand on the stump and broadcast his message up until election day and be on the ballot. So I think this two-party system is a uniparty system. There's a blue and there's a red, and it's really purple because it's really a combination. You really don't have a choice. Yeah, if you really had a choice, I would say, yeah, it did come from the people. But we'd like to try that idea. I don't think we've been able to do that for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of see it like with both DNC and RNC conventions. They seem to be tailoring to the center. Both parties seem to be tailoring more to the center now. You start to see American flags at the DNC this year that you didn't see in 2020. And then on the RNC front, they're trying to be more diverse. And so they're kind of both converging, to one another, albeit even if it's just through imagery, even if it's just all visually speaking. But yeah, I mean, is your outlook for the short or long-term future, both of those, what is it? Is it more grim? Are we looking towards a totalitarian state that eventually arises? Or are we looking towards more decentralization? What do you think?
I think we have to hit bottom first, and we haven't hit bottom. And what does bottom look like? I don't know. I'll outline my thoughts on it. I think bottom is, a change in the currency. I think the dollar will be taken down to some level, a new system, and it depends what the new system looks like. If we have a new system where, it's more equitable and it's not inflationary, then we probably could, work through it. But I think we have to hit a bottom, and I don't think we are there yet. I think we're going to hit one within the next probably 2, 3, 4 years. And what that looks like, it will be very hard. It will be a lower living standard for almost everybody. There'll be less goods available. There'll be less services available. People will be realigned on a more of a spiritual basis, meaning won't take things for granted like they used to. So it'll be similar to the 1930s depression as far as the psychology. And hopefully we have a high enough moral standard that we had in the 30s that we'll have in the 2020s going forward, that we won't have a lot of violence or social unrest, although I expect we will have that. So once we get through that, and we have a foundation to build on, I think we can build back fairly quickly.
Gotcha. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming back on. Really appreciate your time. Tell us where people can find you. And if there's anything else you want to talk about that we didn't get to, feel free to, drop that as well.
Yeah, no, 2 places, themorganreport.com. Sign up for our free service, or you can look at the subscribe button and check out the paid service. Or go to silversunrise.tv. I just finished my set of questions for the documentary, and I think the producer, put up a couple trailers of what I answered on a few of these questions. So those are the 2 places to go.
Excellent. Well, guys, check them out. Link to both of those is down below. And if you made this far to the video, like, subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to check out our Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com, and unlock the entirety of this interview. We will be posting the entirety of this interview on Substack, so be on the lookout for that. With all that said, I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.
There could be a mitigation of the problem where states like, that are more independently minded, just for Florida is another example, and not just say the heck with it. I mean, if you go back to the way the Bill of Rights is written, basically the federal government had very little power at the time of signing of the document, but it's changed, and there's been a huge usurpation of power by the federal government because of their ability to rewrite law and put into place a fictional state within a state